Bravo, this is perfectly beautiful, valuable performance. I see, you have the earlier, yes. Unfortunately, for many years, when I first learned it, when I was a teenager, I also used that score, and only in 2007 we found out, pretty much about 100 years after the first publication of the score, that it was full of mistakes. Not completely full, but first of all, that edition crams, as you know, it's like unreadable. Yeah. So I very much suggest the new Liebman edition that was published in Vienna. It is, I think I cut off the title page, but it's Klaus Liebman, and it's basically part of the complete collection of the works of Berg, but it is, yeah, exactly, but it is probably one of the better editions, if not the Henle has, since 2007, has corrected. I'm not sure at the end, so there are some textual things at the end. You play, I think, and I'm not sure, I think you play them together. It's F sharp is, and then syncopation. Yeah, so I don't know, in that score, I think it's written that way, but it's just so difficult to discern the notes because they are literally compressed horizontally. So a little bit like the Durand Ravel or the some of the Ravel, I mean some of the Rachmaninoff Concerto No. 3 in some of the earlier editions, where all the cadenzas all crammed, really hard to read. So it's perfectly viable. I find that there are two most difficult things for me about continuity. One is in pieces where there is a repeated pattern. Doesn't have to be an etude, but even the first prelude of the Well-Tempered Clavier, as a matter of fact, when you repeat for a couple of pages the same similar pattern, it's very easy that you might get a little sleepy or get a little slower, for example, or you might get a little faster. So when you have the same texture repeated over and over, it's quite hard to maintain continuity because you get into some sort of hypnotic state and you're not any more aware of what is happening. This goes along with, the 11th Klavierstück of Stockhausen, to play the first 142 repeated chords in diminuendo from I forget how many fortissimos to the pianissimo, right? To try to remember this diminuendo over time and keeping the same time. It gets very difficult. Another problem is to maintain continuity in pieces that have an overabundant number of dynamic indications, extreme indications related to slurs, staccatos, leaning tones, dashes, and all of that, and those that indeed have a lot of changes between, accelerando, ritardando, a tempo animato, back to tempo primo, and then there is a tempo. So this new edition clarifies for us that there is indeed a main tempo that's characterized by 3 different moments where the tempo gets a bit slower. In between, there is a fluctuation within the tempo, but ultimately, I remember when I first heard the Masterclass of Pollini, who was playing the piece, and it was a Masterclass all related to the Second Viennese School. And I remember asking him this question, and his answer was, there should still be one main tempo with the abandonment in some moments, but still the ability to return to this main tempo. Another funny thing, and it's one of the wonderful things about attending Masterclass, which I still do, with pleasure when possible, is to hear stories of people who met people who played this music for the composer. So I remember Jerome Lowenthal, who studied with Steuermann. Steuermann was one of the early performers of the music of Schoenberg, and he was part of the circle of Schoenberg and so on. He played the piece for Berg, and the best part was Berg telling Steuermann, according to Mr. Lowenthal, that he said, well, you don't really play all those indications that I wrote in the score, do you? That's just one way of thinking about the piece. Now there goes your Urtext edition. Isn't that amazing? It's almost like the composer is giving you free rein, free possibility to analyze your way, how this indication may work for you, in other words. Another thing that we find from this newer edition is that the slurs do not always indicate legato. Wow. How about that? They should rather be understood as phrase marks, particularly in the case of the many long ones. This we didn't know for 100 years, apparently. Well, maybe. So in some ways, it is possible, even with the pedal, as you know, to disconnect. So the longer the slur, the more it has an indication of phrasing. So that means probably, according to Chopin, the end of the phrase in diminuendo, always in diminuendo. Maybe that's one of the possibilities. But so that's the continuity scene. Returning to the conversation about continuity, is that sometimes I notice that there are, I don't think you were quite stuck, but there were some moments where, particularly before the tempo 3, which is the coda, the codetta, I would say, and later the coda that. So if we slow down too much the descent, which is this, especially this, and start breathing, and we almost tell that there is a new tempo. We almost telegraph that there is a new theme. So the difficulty is to try to, in some ways, to get there. And seemingly passing through, this bar before it, so that it continues with fluidity. It continues, basically. And that's the, in a way, how you can achieve continuity. But let's try, if you don't mind, just the opening. I would suggest this fingering. After a long search, I never liked this chord, because the second finger is never comfortable enough to sound the seventh. There are two superimposed sevenths in the sonata, this and this. It's hard to hear them equally, so I split the seventh, 1/7 for the left hand, 1/7 for the right hand. Yeah, you would say it took only 40 years to come up with that idea, but because I tried to be so close to the text. And finally, the text is not really what's written, it's what sounds also. Can what sounds represent what is in the text, really? Sometimes it doesn't sound that way, so there must be another way to do it to be able. In this case, for me, it was essential to hear. And then you have to follow with your ear the B natural to, because it's all a descent. Whether you interpret that symbol as a breath, physical, like audible, like, or with a pedal. That is up to you. I can't micromanage that. But can you try one more time? hear the accelerando. You see, you have to plan it. Ta, ri, 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 ri. So try to not to feel fermata, but try ta da pam 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 pim pa pam, and then to hear. Yes, it's also the beginning of the piece, and I feel it's almost the end of Tristan und Isolde. You make it sound like the end. It's so intense already. I think a little la, ri, ri, ro, 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 ri. A bit more reserved, I think. It's still piano. Try. And another problem with this sonata is because there are so many details. Like you want to hear that it's very expressive that we forget. It's like in Bach, you know. You want to hear the beginning of the subject, then you hear the answer, and by the time the third subject comes, you can't. You hear 3 notes of the subject and then it vanishes. It's too hard for the ear to keep it going, right? Or we forget one voice. So the forgotten voice is that which was actually the soprano. So try to hear both. Now this is quite a wonderful instrument, and it's quite a terrible instrument at the same time. For Bach, the harpsichord brings all the voices generally to the same level, so they're all audible. In different ways, of course. But this one has, I say Bach because this is the model, it's a highly contrapuntal piece. So we have the possibility of micromanaging these voices and making decisions about the voices. But the hardest thing on the piano is that some of these voices can basically easily disappear in the process. So our ear needs to be keen at following them throughout until the end. Can you try one more time the opening? Again, piano, not too over intense, more like this one, which is important. You see how hard it is? Yeah, try again. But the rhythm now. Da-ya-ti. There it is. Stopping the melody. So you have one more bar before the theme comes, ta ta ti ta ta ta, the animato theme, and it stops. Your rhythm of you slow down so much, then it becomes adagio. How do you it has to be gradual. That's the key. The key word in this piece is being gradual. Use more elbow. You're a little bit stuck, so you go like this. More. So you take away the edge to the sound. I don't know if you notice on that piano when you play octaves, and you have about 1 octave of space between the hands. Let's say, and you have this, you have about 1 octave. this chord does not create enough harmonic sounds to generate a column that builds up to the soprano. And so I hear this and I hear that as two distinct moments in the, like that, instead of like all a gamut of richness. So you have to be so careful when you are exposed, by the way, in octaves of that kind a little later, so that you give a little less with the right arm, and less especially from the elbow down like this. You do a bit of these, and more accompanying the movement from the shoulder as if you were doing more of this. Yes, so a more a tender approach. Try. Okay, now there is a fermata. You play fa, da, di, do, do, stop. Because it's funny because he writes rusher als tempo primo, più animato, rush, speed up to tempo 1. The problem is that the tempo 1, we only had it for about 2 seconds, and then it started already modifying, the basic tempo. But there is a basic tempo in even in the accelerando. You hear it in small moments, like and then maximum to here, and then it already accelerates. And you hear it here. So. This is the only place where it doesn't tell you to accelerate or ritardando. So it's a wonderful place to choose the sonata tempo from here, not from a because that accelerates from a lower tempo into that, but I'd say from here. And of course, the little, right, these are more flexible already, but these, so, play the beginning once in tempo, without accelerando, try. That's it. It's much better, yes. Then you can try accelerando now. In fact, start by doing enough and enough. Play hands together, then play hands together. Don't start with that stuff of the bells it's already complicated enough. We don't want to add a different hypermeter. Okay, try. Sometimes you can enjoy the almost as if you had to do it on the violin, right? A slide. So try. Then go. Then. Ritardando is not molto slow. It's progressive. Always progressive. So here, and you still have these quarters that guide these movement, right? Again from Feel the quarters. No rubato. You have a tendency to make it too dramatic, and that changes your pulse a lot. So when you go, every note counts, you know, but you lose a little bit track of that. Yes, yes. It's hard in Wagner too. When there are so many notes, it's hard to find the structure that leads, you know, the leading tones that bring us to destination, because all the other notes are confusing us. So sometimes practicing quarter notes, basically, like it's much easier. Thank you for making me think of that. I never thought of it until now. But actually, that's going to be very helpful for me too. It really helps to think in quarter about it. So we don't get caught into these, you know, additional symbols. Okay, try it. That's it. Beautiful. Good. By the way, the accelerando, I know you did it, but it's over, exactly, it reaches this note, it reaches all the way to here. I think you intend the accelerando to get to this chord. So when you play it, now, then allargando, and then this one, I presume, you know, that's the problem. Like Schumann writing accelerando and then no a tempo, or ritardando but no a tempo most of the time. Here he writes allargando, no a tempo, but because of the climax at there are your quarters. I think in some ways measure 24 is the end of the allargando. So tempo. But now, second tempo, langsamer als tempo 1. Slower than tempo 1, più lento. It doesn't tell you how slow, but definitely a little slower I intend. Otherwise, we lose. So if it was, say, that would be the same. Of course, it doesn't work, it's more poetic, so it's a different poetry here. I do it in tonal music now. Now in Berg style. And go. Also it's colored with, right, from dominant 7 to diminished. Sort of, right? Yeah, so that's the idea, to try. Let's do the allargando. It's difficult to do the allargando, so I would say maybe from here. If you can. Brava. Here it's easier to feel the gradual ritardando by thinking triplet. When you do Thanks for making me think of that too. But really easy. Fine, if you arpeggiate, fine. Interesting that he wants both. It's a so try from there. Then more expressive, that's what la and the it could be a little more this because you play the speed of these is then ritardando I think it's only these two notes then accelerando tempo accelerando tempo and then you're there. Can you try? That's very Wagnerian almost this. So Debussy, I don't know. And again another run. Spread out. Don't sit on the first note. I don't hear a sextuplet otherwise. I need the. Very orchestral, right? All of these viola and cello, double bass. So amazing, this piece. Glenn Gould said that this was the end of Berg, meaning this was the best piece he ever wrote, and Wozzeck the worst. That is typical of Glenn Gould's, it's either yes or no, there was never in between, But obviously he loved the piece so much that he thought this was the very, very best piece. The truth is that this is either his 6th or 7th sonata, like we saw earlier with Scriabin. These were attempts. Some are maybe now published, some of these small moments in sonatas, unfinished and so on. But it's possible that he also threw in the fire many of these early examples, and this was the first that he wanted to keep. And in fact, it's like one of the most incredible pieces ever written, I find. But that's not a bad start as Opus 1 for a composer, I say, right? Yeah. Good. So now, how do we get to, so a bit more in time with the, and then finally, let's see if you can, there are doubts as where he really wanted. In the recap, in that edition is not clear perhaps, but in the recap you really start the theme from the third theme. Here it starts from but it's not very clear. First of all, the single line is written with the stem up and the stem down, but there is a slur that begins on an anacrusis, so this is the downbeat in 3/4. 1, 2, 3. But he seems to be including the. So if one wants to make a small differentiation, it's possible to do the first time with the pickup and the second time as written, because the slur begins with the bar. This begins 1/4 before the bar. I am not sure. You don't hear it in any recording, so nobody wanted to do it. Probably because there is an insistence on this pattern that starts here. Here. And then you see it goes. So it's hard to understand that note as a thematic note. So I'm still very ambivalent about it. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. When I look analytically, I realize that note is not part of the theme. It's part of this chromaticism that, you know, decides between up and down to finally go down. Like most of this sonata is downward, right? So it's your decision, but it's interesting that the composer marked it a little bit differently with the slur, long slur, in meaning perhaps phrasing in that case. But anyway, can you try maybe from the last... Yes, it's smooth now. Pa 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 pi wait do ti mi re ra ra ra. And I know you want the accent, but too much tension ruins the fluidity of the rhythm you've already created. So from a so these quarters can, you know, continue. A bit more melodic, the C here. Triton. More melodic doesn't mean delaying the F sharp. It means to make sure that each note speaks and it's not veiled, like, or you want, so it's not, yes, yes. Not too slow? Yes. No, that's the wrong note, sorry. You play. Or whatever, you play. Yeah, so that's right, right. Yeah. I heard that the first time, so that is the one that is squeezed in a 20th of an inch. Yes, sorry. I think you can keep it quite you know, pacing yourself without too much rubato when you play the second, like. The first has no dotted notes, so it's more leveled, like. Now if you put a D, you are scriabin already. You already have scriabin fourth. You see where the world is going, not. Continue. Fine, but then. Continue. And then the accelerando begins. Then the nebula, the shadow rather. Sorry. And all of that, you know, begins to navigate you know, more tormentous water. Okay, can you try again this? Listen careful for. The first E is softer than the F sharp. If you hear it in E minor, yes, it's harder to hear because it's less tonal in the same way that we, you know, if you nevertheless is and bring it up. It up on the sol do, not so much from the D. Yeah. Sol do. Where is your rhythm? The triplet. Try. Yes, and when you have too many triplets, they can, you know, proceed too quickly, so then you can have a little bit of freedom in there. But the initial ones, since we are beginning to develop the concept of triplet by doing, we have to have a whatever. Now we can deviate from it, you know, but when there is a new idea, try to install it in the form, and then once it's clear in our thought, then you can manipulate it in other ways. Can you try? La, do, di, do, di, do, do. Take your time then. Good. Non indulge too much, because now crescendo and accelerando. Careful though. You are making a 30-second note. It's a. It's a 16th. Free your arm, free your arm, free your arm. It's too tight. Look at it. Stay closer. Yeah, stay closer to the key. Maybe lower higher. Yes. Yeah, try. Now you're transforming a little bit. Almost I hear an 8th and 2 16th. I need a triplet. So we have 16th notes. Then you can. It has to be clear the difference, right? Otherwise, it becomes 30 seconds and 8th and 16th. I don't know what the text is saying, right? Yes. A little more ritenuto, but fine. There is a difference between ritardando and ritenuto. I don't know what that is. Clearly, it wasn't clear to Berg either, because ritenuto is supposed to be already, and it's in the past, which means it's an instantaneous change of time to a slower time, you know. Ta 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 ta, pipa pipa, and then it's not progressive. It doesn't continue ritardando. But the fact that he writes written and then dot 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 dot, I think he intended it pretty much like a ritardando, so a progressive. Yeah? But ritenuto in Italian is the past form of the verb, so it has already happened in that moment. It's already in the past, which means there is a change of tempo. It's not progressive, like an ing form, like ritenuting. You know what I mean, right? So it's ritened. It means that. But for Berg, clearly it meant, it meant the same in that case. Good. Let's try the ghostly figure now a little. Here is meandering a little bit, it's plotting. Right. I have to tell you one thing. One of the most difficult things when we play the flexibility in the music, when we have 2 plus 3, we end up doing 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1. We don't do 1, 2, 1. 1. So study. Yeah?
I had a question.
Yes.
When he writes the 2 8s and then the triplet, is that a writing out of a small accelerando, or does he mean that literally?
No. It's a form of accelerando. Always in music, Brahms uses ritardandos by playing faster motion, 16th notes, sometimes to doublets, and Mozart. Right? Mozart writes that way. So from faster motion to slower motion, he does it 50%. It's not intended to be 50%. With Beethoven, there are doubts because he's very specific, so it's more doubtful with Beethoven that the relationship. In Mozart, basically, when you see in the fantasy, in the third movement, the allegretto, when you see the passage, it doesn't mean that. It's not mathematically done. It should be, he should have used the contemporary music, from, how it's written. It almost looks like the beam is in diminuendo, and you have darker color here and thinner at the end. And that portrays really much better in the notation what the composer meant. But he didn't have that notation, just like Bach doesn't have the notation of the dotted. And nobody luckily does this, right? I mean, of course you hear that. So I think that's what happens. So in a way, it's a written accelerando, but it's in the molecule. In the cell, you have the animato that goes over the whole cell, whereas the molecule has a little, so you have to see that in the context as not a sudden moment for you to do. So, it becomes so unstable with the general rhythm that. But what we do is usually, and I am a sinner too, I can fall into this very easily when I do. And then you hear a quarter note, 1, 2, 1, tito. Instead, it should be immediately. But already it's animato. In this case, it's already a faster tempo. So it's. Yes. Not so much rubato, yeah, because you have plenty of possibilities later. So, where he writes the rubato by means of accelerando and all of that, right? It's not written as. It's a. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. 1, 2, 3, 4, not a repeated note, but. Yes. it's useful to point out from different culture the idea of a pause. And in Scriabin, I think you have a... In Scriabin fourth, you have that downbeat, and then the next note, it's I don't know, it's a sigh, and then a larger breath, right? So maybe the rubato here is of a different nature, is a agogic accentuation in the way the clavecinist, the harpsichord players of the earlier times intended it. So lengthening a note without accentuation. You lengthen the left hand, and then it feels like the pause is even more meaningful. Yeah. Do from maybe... And then you go. Or whatever. Here is where I wouldn't do that. It's a good idea, but... keeping in time, because and then there is the accelerando, right? So don't look at the small, the minutiae, the little things in terms of speeding up and slowing down. Try not to lose the speeding up and slowing down related to the large, the vast direction of the phrase. Yeah. Okay. Good. Do from. To here, and then continue to here, and here, continue, okay, that is the error in the edition, instead of, yeah, so it was a G sharp. And of course, there is a beautiful symbol that cancels that out. And Berg writes a letter to the publisher, and the publisher says, sorry, you're not selling enough copies, and I cannot justify another expense. And he goes, oh, okay. So let's let the whole generation for 100 years to play the wrong notes. Thank you very much. That's what happened, actually. It's a horrible story. Poor Berg. He begged him. You know, I think there was a second edition that was published after the first, but it was one of those subscription, you know, how many friends of the composers are going to buy this piece, and how many can actually, you know, even play it. So it's very sad. So you have this, then you have, that's correct, right? In that edition, I think, right? And then this one, it's a dominant seventh of an unheard A major, because he never goes there, but it's a dominant seventh fundamentally with a so additive chord with the A sharp. So you get that tritone that Scriabin uses too, by the way. Interesting. It's interesting, but he doesn't use the Scriabinesque. Anyway, it's very interesting, all of this. Even if people came from very different culture, they were really managing, you know, those who were very avant-garde, Berg. In fact, I think Scriabin, since we did Scriabin earlier, I think he looks in some ways to the world of more to the avant-garde, like Bartók, Berg, Schoenberg, and even Debussy, believe it or not. You know, that is the interest. Everybody finding, in the case of Scriabin, finding a way of being Russian in his own way, very, very different, because he doesn't use, for example, folk music like a lot of Russian composers did. Except for a few examples in the early days, he kind of didn't, and let alone Berg, that never thought of it even, yeah? Whereas Bartók instead makes a big deal out of it. So it's very interesting how people in that period try to conjure up, you know, their path to be radicals, to be developers of the language, whereas Rachmaninoff got stuck backwards in a way, right? But we tolerate so many different ways in the way Lenny Bernstein described it as eclecticism, one of the isms, right? So the more eclectic and the more we can understand all these different paths of the music. Yeah. Anyway, sorry that we don't have time to get to the end. This is a profoundly vast, probably the longest 12-minute piece that ever exists, right? In the complexity of the contrapoint, it's unbelievable. It rivals Bach in many instances in a completely different language. I just have a question for you because I saw you doing, instead of, there is an arpeggiation written both on this and on this one. It's so Scriabinesque in some ways. So please play the arpeggios there. Yeah, that's bar 105 and 106, so those two. Yeah, other things actually, because this returns is quite similar, I probably have to point out just to make sure that you have bar numbers in there maybe, or no? Okay, so let's go 2 pages from the end. When you play this, you have F, A flat, C sharp. Sorry.
Oh, wait, no. Oh.
Sol, fa. So it is after the big diminuendo ritardando. Where is that big diminuendo? No. Re, do, di, la, re, do, di, ra. What is that? Okay, so after this, yes, this one, you see, is A natural there?
Yeah.
It's A flat. So it's not, but it's a, that's even more intense. Yeah, that is in the new edition. And also, I remember there was maybe another one. Go remember these things. Anyway, I think that's probably takes care of the most, the biggest errors of that edition. And it's still very popular an edition, but I would, I would make the switch, and then your life will be better, especially because you can read it better. You see how big, they were smart. And I think some of the new edition of Gaspard de la Nuit for Vienna Urtext edition and others, I think they're much bigger now, even the Henley, so you can read better. That one was famously, Ondine was famously squeezed in a way that nobody could read, and so errors can creep in very easily. Yeah, okay, good, thank you. Good.